My name is Anna. I am 34 years old, and I am sitting in a divorce court, watching the man I lived with for 8 years laugh as he signs the divorce papers. He always considered me just a beautiful wife with no ambitions. He didn't even suspect that while he was having an affair with a colleague, I was quietly building my own empire right under his nose. The judge is about to read my financial statement, and I am eagerly waiting for the self-satisfied smile to disappear from his face. But before I tell you exactly how it happened, tell me, have you ever had to stand up for yourself when no one expected it? I come from a small town, but I moved to a big city for my studies because I had big dreams. I chose graphic design and was determined to succeed despite my humble origins. My parents always taught me to value hard work and the ability to save money, and these lessons later proved invaluable. I met my future husband at a charity event for a children's hospital. I was there because I volunteered to create promotional materials for them, and he, as it turned out, only came to maintain his own image. He came from a wealthy family, worked in investments, and exuded the confidence that comes from never thinking about money. "You look out of place here," were his first words to me. Now I understand that it was both an insult and a harbinger of our entire life together. At the time, his charm and ability to look directly into my eyes during conversation made me ignore this warning sign. Our romance was a whirlwind of passions. He took me to restaurants where prices weren't even listed, arranged spontaneous trips to other cities, and introduced me to a lifestyle I had only seen in movies before. He seemed perfect, attentive, successful, and as if he was in love with me. I earned little, working as a junior designer at a marketing firm. I loved my job, the creative tasks, and the feeling of seeing my ideas come to life. But he always said my work was trivial and often suggested I not work at all. "Why get tired for pennies if I can give you everything?" he loved to repeat, not understanding that my career was part of my identity and my independence. He proposed 6 months after we met, in an expensive restaurant overlooking the lights of the big city. The ring was huge, the champagne was expensive, the moment seemed perfect, like in a movie. Several patrons even applauded. Everything was like a fairy tale, and I unhesitatingly said yes. Our wedding was modest but elegant, and it was my decision, despite the pressure from his family, who insisted on a lavish celebration with hundreds of guests. Looking back, I realized that this was one of the rare moments when I stood my ground, not giving in to the demands of his relatives. "A modest wedding for a modest girl," his mother remarked with a strained smile that never reached her eyes. This was my first real experience of how his family saw me as someone not quite worthy of their son. After our honeymoon on the islands, we moved into his luxurious condominium in the center of the big city. Everything there looked expensive, stylish, and cold, as if it were an extension of his family. I tried to add a little warmth, to hang photos, bright paintings, to bring in something of my own, but he preferred strict minimalism, which emphasized his status more than our sense of home. The first warning signs appeared after several months. He nitpicked every one of my interior choices, criticized my friends, and made subtle hints that my career didn't deserve serious attention. "Graphic design is so primitive," he said once after meeting my colleagues. "You could be outstanding, and you're wasting your talent creating logos for unknown companies." I tried to fit into his social circle among the wives of other bankers and executives who spent their days in spas and discussing charity dinners. They were polite to me, but I saw that they didn't truly accept me. At one dinner party, I accidentally overheard one of them call me a middle-class experiment, and instead of siding with me, he just suggested I try harder, update my wardrobe, or take up tennis. "They just want to see that you're making an effort to become part of our circle," he said, as if my personality could be tailored to their standards. The first years of marriage were a strange mixture of luxury and loneliness, expensive gifts, and an increasingly fading sense of self-worth. I gradually turned into the woman he wanted to see by his side, a beautiful companion who looked flawless, and that independent and creative part of me gradually disappeared. After 2 years of living together, the tension simmering beneath the surface began to erupt. He always carefully monitored our expenses, but over time he began to literally control every purchase I made, although he himself spent money without explanation. "Do you really need another painting set?" he asked, examining the credit card statement. "That's $200 that could be invested." At the same time, he could easily spend thousands on a new watch or sports equipment. Gradually, I became isolated from friends and family. Trips to my parents became rare because he always found reasons: business meetings, dinners with clients, or simply the opinion that my hometown was too provincial for his taste. College friends stopped calling, as he made it clear that he considered them not refined enough. "Your friend asked what region our wine was from," he said after a dinner party I hosted, as if we would serve something local. It's awkward. My career, which once brought pride, turned into a constant source of arguments. When I was offered a promotion to senior designer, there was no support. "Is a small raise worth extra hours away from home? We're planning a family soon, remember?" This came as a surprise to me, because every time I brought up the topic of children, he said it wasn't time yet. During this period, I discovered an interest in digital marketing. The agency where I worked began to develop new directions, and I volunteered to study analytics and strategy. It turned out that I had a talent for understanding customer behavior and creating campaigns that yielded tangible results. Encouraged, I shared with him the idea of opening my own small digital marketing agency. His reaction was cold. "Be realistic. Business requires real commercial talent, and that's not quite you. Most such firms go bankrupt in the first year." Everything related to money only emphasized how different we were. For him, it was important to have the right address, the right car, the right resorts, all to maintain the image of a successful person. I, having grown up in an ordinary family, believed in saving sensible investments, and that value was more important than loud price tags. By our 3rd anniversary, my husband's late returns from work became common, not rare. Clients, an unstable market, quarterly reports, his excuses changed, but the essence remained the same. I dined alone, went to bed alone, and increasingly felt like a lonely woman living under strict control, like a child on pocket money. The first truly serious conflict happened after the annual Christmas dinner with his family. In the car, his mother directly asked when grandchildren would appear. I replied that I was ready as soon as he was, but he deftly changed the subject. Later, at home, when I tried to discuss the topic, his reaction was icy. "Children are a huge responsibility and colossal expenses," he said, taking off his tie. "With your modest career and my family's expectations, our children will need trust funds, private schools, the right connections. We're not ready yet." "Not ready?" I asked, stunned. "You earn millions. Your family has an inheritance. What exactly are we waiting for?" His answer sounded as if he had already decided everything long ago. "My money is not the problem. You yourself haven't yet proven that you can contribute anything to a child's future." These words cut deep. His condescending attitude towards my career, which he considered insignificant, only strengthened my resolve. I realized that I needed financial independence not for luxury, but for my own peace of mind. That same week, I opened a separate account at another bank and set up a small automatic transfer from my salary. Discreet enough for him not to notice, but enough to start building something of my own. At the same time, I began to study the basics of independence, reading books on investments, taking free courses on business management, and subscribing to newsletters about entrepreneurship. I did all of this in my browser's private mode, leaving no traces. The woman who was once dazzled by expensive gestures and dinners was now, step by step, building an escape plan from a gilded cage. While he stayed late at work, I was laying the foundation for my freedom. Using my accumulated money, I registered a small company and created a simple but professional website with a portfolio and a list of services. The hardest part was finding time to work without him suspecting anything. I turned the rarely used guest room into an office, explaining that it was for freelance orders to slightly increase our income. He barely paid attention, waving his hand at my activity, calling it a hobby. The only condition was that it shouldn't interfere with social gatherings and his plans. I found my first client by chance in a coffee shop. I overheard the owner of a small bakery complaining about inflated agency fees. I can't afford $5,000 for advertising, but I'm losing clients because of chain networks, she told the barista. I approached, introduced myself, talked about my experience, and offered help for a small fee, explaining that I was building my portfolio. She decided to give it a try, and the result exceeded expectations. Her bakery's social media activity grew by 300%, and a new advertising campaign attracted large corporate clients. This success was not only my first big victory, but also gave me a true friendship, which I lacked so much in my husband's pretentious world. She was sincere, hardworking, and valued my talent in a way he never did. "You have a gift," she said once over coffee. "You understand what makes a business special, and you know how to convey it to people." I often worked late while he was on another business trip. I turned the walk-in closet into a small studio for client calls, hanging old blankets for soundproofing. Each new order simultaneously inspired and frightened me. It inspired me because my business was growing. It frightened me because exposure could cause a storm. I stumbled, underestimated the cost of complex orders, overestimated deadlines, but I quickly learned. Each new client showed me how to conduct business, set boundaries, and value my own work. I spent my savings on equipment and programs, hiding purchases among household expenses or paying in cash. The client list grew all year thanks to recommendations and word of mouth. Instead of spending the profits on trifles, I invested most of it back into the business and saved for the future. He noticed nothing, believing my growing confidence was the result of me finally adapting to his world, and not thanks to my own achievements. The turning point came when I was working with a local jewelry designer. After my marketing campaign, her sales skyrocketed so much that her story was published in a small business magazine. My name had to be hidden, citing confidentiality, but this success opened doors to large clients for me. Through acquaintances, I met a woman entrepreneur who sold her first startup for a huge sum and was starting a new project. At first, she hired me for a small task, and then she became my regular client and mentor. "You charge too little for your work," she said directly, looking at my rates. "Triple the prices and see how the perception of your talent changes." She was right. As soon as I raised my prices, more reputable companies, willing to pay for quality, flocked to me. She also showed me the world of investments beyond ordinary savings accounts. "Money loses value if it just sits there," she explained. Under her guidance, I began to invest small amounts in promising technology companies, including her new project, which offered solutions for small businesses. As my business developed, my investment portfolio also grew. This euphoria, when I saw myself building something significant with my own hands, was exhilarating. For the first time since I met my husband, I felt alive again, full of energy and independence. At social events, I continued to play the role of an exemplary wife, nodding when his colleagues' wives discussed purchases and charity committees. I sat at his client dinners, impeccably maintaining the desired image. While at home, I managed a growing business and made investment decisions that gradually changed my life. This double life was exhausting, but it gave me a sense of freedom that I increasingly lacked in our controlled marriage. By the 5th year of our life together, the facade began to crumble. It all started with one message that appeared on his phone screen while he was in the shower. On the locked display, words from some woman flashed. "I already miss you. Last night was..." The message disappeared before I could finish reading it, but doubts had already taken root. He became even more distant, often returning home with the scent of another woman's perfume, explaining it as farewell hugs with clients. I didn't accuse him immediately. I decided to observe. I noticed every little thing. Late meetings on Thursdays that dragged on until 9 o'clock. Conferences on weekends. Dinners with clients, always at the same restaurant. On another Thursday, I said I was going to help a friend with an event, but instead, I parked near that very restaurant. At 8:30, his car pulled into the parking lot. 10 minutes later, a silver car pulled up and a woman with long, dark hair got out. Even from a distance, I recognized her, a colleague from his firm. I saw them hug too closely, saw him kiss her right in the parking lot before they went inside. My hands trembled as I took pictures of them with my phone. And inside, a void of betrayal grew, along with the realization that my suspicions were true. I gave them half an hour before entering the restaurant. They were sitting in a corner, his hand on hers. He leaned towards her as if the world around them had disappeared. I approached quietly. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed everyone could hear it. "This explains your late meetings," I said. My voice was steady, though everything inside me was burning. He recoiled sharply. His face went through several expressions, from shock to guilt, and, finally, to irritation at being caught. The woman he was with tried to look embarrassed, grabbed her purse, and mumbled something, disappearing to the side. "It's not what you think," he began in the same calm tone he used to soothe difficult clients. I replied that it looked exactly like he was having dinner with his mistress while his wife thought he was at work. Our conversation turned into a strange, almost surreal scene. He apologized in a half-whisper, assured me that it was just a physical relationship, and even dared to accuse me of him finding solace elsewhere. "You got too carried away with your little projects," he said, quieter, noticing that the patrons nearby had started looking at us. "You became boring. When was the last time you tried for our marriage?" I left the restaurant alone, aimlessly driving around the city before returning home. He only appeared after midnight, promising to break off the relationship, talking about counseling, and even suggesting a second honeymoon. At the time, I didn't fully understand why, but I pretended to be willing to consider his words. I really needed time, but not for forgiveness, but to think through my steps. The following weeks turned into a double-edged game. He feigned being a caring husband, brought flowers, offered romantic evenings, while I, in parallel, met with lawyers, presenting these meetings as if they were work matters. The lawyer, introduced to me by acquaintances, explained how everything worked. In this state, the principle of equitable distribution applies, and without a prenuptial agreement, property is divided as the court decides, and not always equally. I learned about the complexities that await someone divorcing a person from a wealthy family, and how important it is to gather all documents and evidence in advance. "Knowledge is power, especially in divorce," she said. My cautious steps were interrupted when he once found my browser history on our shared computer. I forgot to turn on private mode, having searched for information on the process of financial disclosure in divorce cases. His rage flared instantly. He cornered me in the kitchen, holding his phone with a screenshot. "So this is what you're doing. You want to leave and take my money." His face turned crimson. A vein pulsed on his temple. "Remember, without me, you'll have nothing. My family lawyers will take care of that." I calmly replied that I wasn't planning anything, just researching everything after what happened. My composure seemed to calm him a little, but the threat hung in the air. That night, I moved all important business documents to secure cloud storage and made copies of digital records to a flash drive, which I hid in a safe he didn't know about. 3 weeks later, I accidentally stumbled upon another piece of evidence. While cleaning his wardrobe, which he never did, I found a jewelry box hidden in his winter boots. Inside was a receipt for an expensive bracelet purchased 2 months ago. I had never received such a gift. Even knowing about his infidelity, seeing that he was investing such money in another woman was a blow. The amount was almost $15,000, our money, on her. As I processed this discovery, I heard the door open. His and that woman's voices laughed in the hallway. I froze in the wardrobe. They entered the bedroom, not expecting to see me home in the middle of the day. I walked out when they were hugging at the foot of our bed, the bed we had slept in for 5 years. He merely said in surprise that he hadn't expected me home, and I, surprised by my own calmness, said I decided to take half a day off. The conversation that followed did not resemble movie scenes, full of emotion. It became cold and pragmatic. "This saves me a difficult conversation," he said in a level tone. "I want a divorce. She and I are building a future together." His confidence sounded as if the outcome was already decided. He announced that he would allow me to keep my personal belongings and give me a small sum to start my life anew. The house, all investments, and even the paintings we bought together would remain with him. "My lawyers will contact you," he concluded, clearly surprised that I wasn't crying or begging for mercy. "You'd better find new housing today." I calmly replied that by law, it was still my home, so I was staying and he and his mistress could look for a hotel. His face darkened, but the woman pulled his arm. "Let's go. We'll discuss this later," she said. As he left, he turned back and threw one last warning. "You'll regret not accepting my offer. When my lawyers are done, you'll be lucky if you can afford a tiny studio in the worst part of town." When the door closed behind them, I leaned against it and, for the first time since I learned of his affair, allowed myself to smile. He had no idea what awaited him. The very next day after I caught them together in our bedroom, he moved out most of his clothes and personal belongings. That same day, I changed the locks. It was a legally questionable move, but it gave me time to document everything we owned before he could take anything. His confidence in my financial naivete became obvious when I saw the first property division proposal from his lawyer. A lump sum payment of $75,000 and 6 months of living expenses in exchange for a complete waiver of all other assets, including the house I had helped furnish for 5 years. "He's just testing how far he can go," the lawyer explained when I showed her the documents. "He thinks you don't know your rights or the true extent of what you own." Under her guidance, I rejected the offer and initiated the financial disclosure process, a procedure that requires both parties to reveal all their assets and liabilities. He, through his lawyer, began to stall, complicating every step. "This is a standard tactic," my lawyer reassured me. "They're trying to exhaust your strength and resources until you agree to less." He didn't know I had my own cards. I had carefully tracked our finances for years, including accounts he thought I wasn't aware of. And I had my own growing savings and investments, which he didn't even suspect. After a long discussion, we made a strategic decision: not to disclose the full value of my business and investments in the initial stages of negotiations. Under state law, a business created during marriage is usually considered community property, but the lawyer found a loophole. He not only didn't support my work, but actively hindered its development, which could be grounds for exclusion. "We'll reveal everything when the time comes," she assured me. "Let him believe his picture of you for now." While the legal process dragged on, he launched an attack from another side. Mutual friends stopped answering calls, invitations to events disappeared. Even the doorman, who had always been friendly, now became cold. Later, I learned that he was spreading rumors, that I was cheating on him, that I was unstable, and that he had filed for divorce despite all his attempts to save the marriage. In a world where his family's name carried weight, no one asked questions. This isolation proved unexpectedly painful. People with whom I shared holidays and entrusted personal matters disappeared from my life, believing the lies. Only 2 women remained, who never doubted my side. People who believe gossip without even listening to both sides are not worth your energy, one of them said over coffee and fresh pastries after a particularly difficult day. Focus on building a new life, not on mourning the old one. His attempts to intimidate me only intensified when he realized I wasn't going to silently sign his terms. Late-night calls hinting that he would make sure I could never work in this city again. Even threats that he would report my business to the tax authorities, although my finances were impeccably documented. His family also intervened. His mother called to talk nicely. "We always knew you weren't right for him," she said with cold confidence. "But we accepted you because he chose you. Don't make it difficult. Accept what they offer you and leave with dignity." I calmly replied that I would follow my lawyer's advice. Years spent enduring subtle barbs at family dinners had taught me restraint. His overconfidence ultimately became his weakness. Convinced that I lacked the resources for a long confrontation, he made several serious mistakes. The biggest one was that he failed to declare accounts in the Cayman Islands, about which I already had documents. He understated the value of his investment portfolio and claimed that some family heirlooms were solely his property, although they were clearly given to us both. The lawyer meticulously recorded every inconsistency, building a case that was designed to undermine his credibility in the eyes of the court. Meanwhile, my business continued to grow exponentially. A marketing campaign I designed for a chain of regional restaurants unexpectedly went viral and attracted the attention of industry publications. I declined interviews citing personal reasons, but this success brought a flood of new clients. The real breakthrough came when I signed a contract with a national retail chain to completely overhaul their digital marketing strategy. This was a 6-figure deal that transformed my business from successful to outstanding. I hired 3 employees, leased an office, and began turning away clients who didn't align with my company's mission. All of this was happening while he and his legal team continued to portray me as an unsuccessful freelancer dependent on his financial support. His perceptions of me, as a naive girl from the provinces, dazzled by his wealth, were so deeply ingrained that he couldn't even imagine my success could exist without him. On the evening before the final hearing, I sat alone in the condominium that had never become a home, thinking about my journey. 5 years ago, I had so desperately tried to conform to him that I almost lost myself. His betrayal, however painful, forced me to rediscover my strength, ambition, and worth. I packed a small bag. Regardless of the court's decision, I decided not to spend another night in that place. My new penthouse apartment was already ready, purchased through a company he didn't know about, furnished with items chosen not for status display, but for comfort and beauty. As I zipped up my bag, my phone vibrated. A message from a friend read, "Tomorrow, remember who you are, not who he tried to make you." The morning of the court day was clear and fresh. I put on a dark blue suit, understated but confident, and one piece of jewelry, a small diamond pendant my friends gave me for my business's first anniversary. They called it the Diamond of Independence. I arrived at court early, as my lawyer advised. He was already there, in an expensive suit, a confident posture, next to his lawyer, a senior partner from a prestigious firm known for aggressive divorces on behalf of wealthy clients. He smirked when he saw me, leaned over to his lawyer, and whispered something, which made them both laugh. His confidence was palpable in every move. He considered this just a formality before his victory. My lawyer appeared a few minutes later, in a red suit that stood out against the muted tones of the courtroom. Unlike his lawyer with a team of assistants, she came alone, but her calm confidence was more powerful than any words. "Ready?" she asked, looking directly, showing no extra emotion. "More than," I replied. The courtroom was strict and imposing. The judge, a woman with silver streaks in her dark hair and a discerning gaze, was known for her fairness, but had no tolerance for manipulation or theatrics. When the hearing began, he put on a performance worthy of a stage. His testimony portrayed him as a devoted husband who supported his wife's modest ambitions, but in return received ingratitude and unsubstantiated claims. "I only want a fair decision, Your Honor," he pronounced with a carefully practiced intonation, expressing restrained disappointment. He stated that he had offered a generous settlement that would allow me to maintain comfort while I rebuilt my career. His lawyer presented arguments for property division, insisting that family wealth was separate property, downplaying my contribution, and asserting that the house, purchased primarily with his income, should remain his. I remained calm, did not react to their words, and did not allow myself to show emotion. The judge occasionally glanced at me, her face inscrutable. When it was time to sign the preliminary divorce decree, which legally separated our marital status pending resolution of financial matters, he made a spectacle of it. He signed with a flourish, huffed, and pocketed his expensive pen. As he walked past, he quietly whispered, "Enjoy going back to your parents' basement." The lawyer's presentation began without extraneous gestures, methodically and confidently, sharply contrasting with the opponent's theatrical arguments. She presented evidence of his financial manipulations, hidden accounts, expensive gifts to his mistress, his system of financial control. "Your Honor," she said, "Mr. tried to circumvent the law by concealing joint assets, which is a violation of state requirements. Documents with accounts, their dates, numbers, and balances were laid on the table." He visibly tensed, his smug look vanished, his gaze darting between the lawyer and the court. His lawyer tried to request a recess, but the judge refused. "Let's continue. I want to hear everything about the hidden assets." The atmosphere grew tense as my lawyer, step by step, exposed his tricks. The judge's face became increasingly stern, and I could see that the evidence was having an effect. "Furthermore, Your Honor," the lawyer continued, "I ask the court to consider the separate property created by my client during the marriage without the slightest support from her spouse. The moment we had prepared for had arrived." The judge looked up. "Explain, counsel." The lawyer explained that my business was founded during the marriage, but my spouse not only did not invest in it, but on the contrary, actively obstructed and belittled my ambitions, which was confirmed by messages and letters. The judge carefully examined the evidence before addressing me directly for the first time. "Have you provided a full financial disclosure?" she asked. "Not yet, Your Honor, but I am ready to do so now," I replied, as we had planned. The lawyer handed the court a sealed envelope with a full financial report, which we had held back until the decisive moment. "I asked the court to take it into consideration before making a decision," she said. The judge nodded and opened the envelope. Silence reigned in the courtroom. Only a slight sigh from the judge, and a raised eyebrow betrayed her surprise. After a long pause, she spoke. "For the record, I will read out the list of assets." My heart pounded. "A digital marketing firm founded 3 years ago, Current valuation, $4,200,000. His head snapped back. The expression of disbelief on his face was almost comical. Investment portfolio, including shares in technology companies and startups, $1,800,000. His fingers clenched the edge of the table, knuckles white. Real estate, acquired 3 months ago, valued at $950,000. By this point, he looked as if he were physically ill. The judge summarized, total assets, $6,950,000. Silence hung in the courtroom. He looked at me as if I were a stranger. I felt no triumph, only profound relief that the truth had been spoken aloud. The judge broke the silence. Mister, do you wish to reconsider your previous statements that Ms. was financially dependent on you? He remained silent. His lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, these assets were acquired during the marriage. Therefore, the spouse has a right to a share. But my lawyer was ready. I asked the court to refer to Clause 23 of the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties. It explicitly states, any business created by one spouse without financial contribution from the other remains separate property upon divorce. The lawyer added that this clause was initially included to protect the spouse's future projects, but now it had turned against him. The wording in the prenuptial agreement applied equally to the business I had built entirely on my own, without financial support from my spouse. The judge slowly nodded, examining the document. The wording is clear. Proceed, she said. The lawyer meticulously described how I built the company from scratch, using my own savings and reinvesting profits, while he actively hindered my efforts. She presented written testimonies from clients and a mentor, confirming my independent work and business acumen. I watched him. The man who an hour ago had laughed while signing the divorce papers now sat motionless, as if petrified. His confidence crumbled before my eyes. The woman sitting in the courtroom quietly left him, without a glance in my direction. The judge retired for half an hour to review the documents. When she returned, her voice was firm. Based on the evidence presented and the terms of the prenuptial agreement, the court finds that the digital marketing company and its associated investment portfolio are separate property, belonging exclusively to the plaintiff. He let out a strange, choked sound, something between a sigh and an objection. The judge continued. Furthermore, given that the defendant failed to disclose all joint assets as required by law, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff in the division of the remaining property. The subsequent legal formulations were lost in details, but the meaning was clear. I retained my business, investments, and new real estate, and also received the larger portion of the joint assets. The house was to be sold, and the proceeds divided according to the formula set by the court. When we stood to leave the courtroom, he approached me, despite his lawyer's attempts to hold him back. Did you plan all this? He hissed, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. All these years you waited to destroy me. I looked at the man I once loved and now saw as a stranger, consumed by his own victimhood. No, I was building something while you were destroying what we had. That's our difference. My lawyer gently led me away. He was left alone in the empty courtroom, surrounded by the wreckage of his confidence. Stepping out onto the street, I felt no triumph, only liberation. With each step down the marble stairs, the weight of years of pretense and deceit lifted from my shoulders. He tried to intercept me at the exit. His rage had given way to forced charm. We should talk privately. It seems I underestimated you. Perhaps we rushed the breakup, he said, trying to smile. I almost laughed at his predictability. Now that he knew I was wealthy, I suddenly seemed worthy to him again. The woman for whom he had ruined everything was already gone. We have nothing left to say. The court has made its decision, I said. His smile wavered, but he still tried to hold my gaze. We built a life together. All your successes are part of our history too. Think of the power we would have together. My lawyer stepped between us. All further communication will be through representatives only, she stated coldly. That evening, I met with those who had supported me from the beginning. Over dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the river, we raised our glasses not to the defeat of another, but to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter. To the woman who built an empire, while a fool looked the other way. One of them said, raising a glass of champagne. A week later, I moved into my new apartment with panoramic views of the lake. A spacious, open-plan apartment that felt warm and personal from day one, unlike the cold luxury of the previous house. After the divorce was finalized, I could finally speak openly about my business. I expanded the office, taking up an entire floor in the city center, and assembled a team of talented specialists who shared my vision. The company grew beyond my dreams. By the end of the first year after the divorce, we had clients across the country, and we were preparing for international expansion. My close friend became the chief operating officer. Her ability to organize and manage people perfectly complemented my creative approach. One of the most important steps was reconnecting with my family. He had subtly isolated me from them for years, criticizing and making visits difficult. For the first time in a long time, I spent holidays at home, laughed in my parents' kitchen, played with my nieces and nephews, and once again felt the simplicity and values that had once helped me become strong. We always knew you were special, my mother said. We were just afraid you would forget who you are. Despite professional success, the consequences of the divorce were still evident. There were nights when I woke up angry for the years spent living under his dictate. There were moments when I doubted myself, wondering how I could have missed the obvious. I started working with a therapist to understand myself. She helped me realize how subtly manipulation can accumulate and how even strong people become vulnerable. Healing is not a straight path, she often said. Sometimes you feel strong, sometimes you feel pain. Both are normal. 6 months after the divorce, I used part of my funds to establish a foundation for women, helping them achieve financial independence, especially those leaving toxic relationships. We provided grants, mentorship, and training in money management and entrepreneurship. The foundation became my platform for public speaking, where I shared my story and what I had learned. My message was simple. Financial independence is not just about money. It's the freedom to make choices based on your values, not fear or need. Almost a year after the divorce was finalized, I coincidentally met him at a charity reception. He looked older and less confident. His new companion was not the woman for whom he had destroyed our marriage. He approached cautiously, as if afraid of being rejected again. He approached, trying to sound confident, but his voice no longer held its former arrogance. "You look good," he said. "I heard your company is achieving impressive results." "That's right," I replied calmly. After a short pause, he confessed, "I never saw it. Your potential. I was too focused on making you the wife I thought you should be, and I didn't notice who you really were." I looked at the man around whom I had once built my life, and I felt neither love nor hatred, only a slight compassion for someone who had measured worth by such narrow standards his entire life. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said sincerely before returning to my friends at the table. That evening, in the quiet of my home, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. What seemed like the most painful rejection, his infidelity and cold neglect, became what freed me. His attempt to erase me from his life forced me to rediscover my own value. In time, I started dating again, approaching relationships with clear boundaries and an understanding of my principles. I no longer needed to conform to others' expectations. The right person would accept me as I am, with all my achievements and imperfections. My life is far from perfect now, but it is authentically mine. Every decision, from choosing clients to the paintings on the walls, reflects my own values, not someone else's ideas. The financial status that so shocked him in the courtroom continues to grow, but most importantly, my sense of peace and purpose grows. If you're listening to this story and are at a crossroads, feeling undervalued or lost, remember, what seems like an end often turns out to be a beginning in disguise. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Have you ever had a moment when you were underestimated and you proved them wrong? Share your story. If my story resonates with you, support it with a like and a subscription. And share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not defined by someone else's opinion. Thank you for listening to my story.